Snow Treasure, Chapter 21. It was Uncle Victor who had spoken. It took some minutes for Mrs. Lundstrom and Peter to recover from their astonishment. When they did, they realized that they were being shown up a fur-screened gangplank. At its head stood Rolls, the mate, with a hand to help them alight on the dancing deck. "But you're not the ones to be surprised," Victor was saying. "What about me? I was expecting the two teams as usual. Instead, I find only you two and Bunny and his friends." The Clang Pearson was a fishing smack of 50 tons. She had been built long before Uncle Victor's time for the herring industry. She carried a sloop rig and could set a course and square sail. But Uncle Victor had installed a 13-horsepower engine, so the Clang had no need to wait for a wind, but could travel under her own force at all times. When newer and finer boats were built in the shipyards of the coast, people would ask Victor Lundstrom why he didn't get one. "Why do you sail that tub?" they would question, knowing he could afford the finest. To people who spoke in such fashion, Uncle Victor had little to say, but Peter knew what his uncle thought about the Clang. "There was never such a ship in the whole history of navigation," he once told Peter. "She's the sturdiest thing afloat, and she's as easy to manage as a kitten. As for capacity, well, for her size, she's the beat of anything you ever heard tell of. Why, I could carry food and fuel for 5 years if I ever decided to make a polar expedition." When Uncle Victor bought the smack years ago, he changed her name. There were those who asked why the name Clang Pearson, but Peter knew why his uncle called the boat he loved after one of his heroes. Clang Pearson was the Norseman who went to America and who, because of his bravery in the face of hardships, was called the Norwegian Daniel Boone. "I'll give you tea, although I didn't expect visitors." Uncle Victor showed them into his cabin. One of the greatest thrills of Peter's childhood was to have tea aboard the Clang. But alas, invitations were hard to get. Uncle Victor was a busy man with his fishing crews, and the Clang was at sea much of the time. It was all so cheery and bright aboard the ship. In the cabin, Peter could see his face reflected in a dozen different surfaces. It was spotless as only a ship's cabin can be. Leather bunks along 2 sides served as seats in the daytime. Over one of these were 2 portholes, darkened now by the camouflage shrubbery outside. But there were peepholes in the shrubbery, and through them came a jagged broken light. A large round table centered the cabin. It was fastened to the deck, and above it hung a lamp on a chain. About the only other thing of importance was a large map of Europe as it was in the 1930s. The map was draped with the red field and white-bordered blue cross of the flag of Norway. "And what is the news of Lars?" Victor asked about his brother. "There's little to tell," Mrs. Lundstrom said sadly. "His regiment got to Trondheim, and that's about all we know." "There's been fierce fighting there." Uncle Victor lit a spirit lamp. He told what he had been able to learn about the army. His visitors listened eagerly. Then Mrs. Lundstrom explained the purpose of their visit. "We didn't come to make a social call," she said. "I don't dare leave Bunny and the others very long. They may get tired and wander away. We came to warn you that someone may be watching you. Helga Thompson said she heard something and saw someone move down here yesterday. Then Peter saw a German soldier on skis come out of the trail from here that cuts the road near the homes." Uncle Victor looked grave. "It could have been Rolls or me that Helga saw. We've been watching every move these youngsters make. They haven't come once that one or the other of us hasn't stood guard." "Yes, we thought as much," Mrs. Lundstrom said. "We talked of that last night when Herr Holm brought the news. I wouldn't have given it a thought if Peter hadn't seen the soldier on skis come out of the trail." Uncle Victor had set the kettle on a spirit lamp and now lifted the lid to see if it was boiling. "You could tell from the snow prints," Peter suggested. "Yes, we could, after a distance. But it's pretty well trampled around here with Rolls and me going out night after night to bring the gold aboard. But one of us will go up the trail tonight and see," his uncle answered. "But the curfew?" Uncle Victor only laughed. He made the tea and poured it and passed the cups to his guests. There were spice cakes that Rolls brought in from the galley. "There's no such thing as being too cautious about spies," Uncle Victor said after a time. "But if anyone had been here in the daylight, surely Rolls or I would have seen him. Of course, I did take 40 winks yesterday afternoon when the children were here. You see, when the two of us dig up and carry on board almost 1,000 pounds of gold, it's pretty late and we're tired. We've things to do in the morning to get ready to sail, so we have to catch up on our sleep when we can. But Rolls was around, weren't you, old fellow? Yes, I was, but when I saw Peter, I knew everything'd be all right. I'd left my pipe on board and I came back just long enough to smoke a pipeful. Then someone could have been around and neither you nor I would have known. Is there much more gold to load? Victor asked his sister-in-law after a pause. No, you have nearly all of it. Pergarson's been checking. The last of next week will finish it. And it won't be 6 weeks until Tuesday. We've been lucky, Victor. Think if the thaws had come earlier. Well, you can't get it down here too soon to suit me. He stirred his tea. The business of hanging around isn't exactly safe. You mean you're ready to sail? Peter asked. As soon as the gold's loaded, you can go to America? That's right, son. It's exactly what I mean. Then you know where the mines are laid? Sure, I've known that for weeks, since we entered the war on the side of Britain and France. So hurry and get the gold down here so I can be underway. It'll be bad enough for the rest of you if you're caught, but Rolls and I would be shot. Oh, Uncle Victor! But don't worry, we're not going to get caught. It's too much money to give the Germans, and anyway, I'd like to see New York again.